Well, welcome back, everybody. So glad to see you guys here on our Tuesday gathering, our regular meeting. It's so good to see your faces week after week. And I'm really excited to have Kelda back with us today. This is her second time teaching us in the gathering, and she she has a very passionate what's the word, Kelda? Like you have a lot of love for audiobooks. And
I do have a
she
lot of
brought
love for
this
audiobooks.
she brought this idea to me and brought it to my attention. And we've been talking about it recently on the blog and some other contexts, just the use of audio for our writing, for podcasting. But today we're going to talk a little bit just about the use and the way we can use audiobooks in our writing. And so, Kelda, tell us a little bit about like where this love affair came with audiobooks and how you integrate that into your writing.
Well, for me personally, I have never had really great vision. I've always needed glasses or something from even kindergarten. Uh, I couldn't see the board from the back of the room, that kind of thing. But I love being read to, first of all. And like if I had to read something really hard in high school, even like I remember in American literature, my grandmother read me The Grapes of Wrath because I did not like it. I'm not a Steinbeck fan. So I don't please don't make me read that. I cried a lot. She was just like, baby, it's okay. It's okay. I'll just read it to you. So I would just lay there and she read me the whole book. And she was an avid reader. Now, I wouldn't say that she was a reader of great literature. She read a lot of Harlequin romance, but she was an avid reader. She read every single day. So I just thought that was so loving for her to lay there, sit there with me and just read this book with me.
Definitely. That's a sweet
And
memory.
also in high school, I had a friend, my freshman and sophomore years, that was legally blind. And she was given books on audio from the blind. This was before audiobooks were a thing. Like you couldn't buy them in stores. Like they were
Oh
not
yeah.
marketed anywhere. And so this is the early 80s. And so she had these cassette tapes. And I'm like, I would sit with her at every break, in every class, at every lunch, and we would share the headphones. Like we would share the headphones. Um, and uh, I, would we were already friends, but I used her technology to get me through a lot of literature, a lot of history that we had to read, different novels we had to read, just because she would just be so willing to share them. Like, why can't we have this? Why don't we have this technology? And So I guess it's just always been a go-to. Um, if I could get it on a free download, like from LibriVox or through the library, that became a thing. But and for a long time, audios were probably three times as much to purchase. Like
Yeah.
the CDs was probably like three times as much as the book. Like you might spend $75, $80 for that and spend 15 for the book.
Yeah.
But
I remember
that's
those
I love
days.
it.
I remember there was a books on tape store, and you had
Hmm.
to go physically to the store, but you could rent the books on tape and you would listen to them for long car rides. It was a much more difficult process and expensive process to get your hands on audiobooks, but now they're
Hmm.
just pervasive. They're everywhere.
Right.
So yeah, so I'd love to kind of survey the audience right now and just ask, either show of hands, or like show your hands or type in the chat, like if you are an audiobook consumer, if you enjoy audiobooks, like maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, like how comfortable and familiar are you with using audiobooks? Yeah. Rosemary, Kathy, Gloria's like at a
Yeah.
7, 6 or
Yeah. Six,
7.
seven. Yeah.
Abigail, she's lower on the scale. She's 3. Space hasn't really gotten into them. So, I mean, I think we have a range of experience with audiobooks represented here. So, tell us a little bit about like, how do you how do you use this? Like, let's bring it to like the practice of writing in your
Okay.
own life. I know that you've done some audio recordings for your own books. So tell us what that process was like. What were you the one narrating?
Yes.
That kind of thing.
So of my, how many books do I have? Eight. Sorry, I think I have to think. 8 books. I think I have 8 books or 9 books now. Monsieur just came out, so that might have been book 9. Um, I have recorded and done all the audio editing for 5 full books. I did a lot of the preface and the intro kind of stuff for a teen novel that I actually YA whatever that I had one of my former students record for me. But I did all the audio editing. He just came in and read the chapters for me. Because it needed to be from a young man's perspective, and he had the right voice quality, and he just did a phenomenal job on Autumn's Captive. Um, but I love that you've lost track of how many. Sorry, guys. I'm like counting them up on my shelf. Um, but because I have multiple, just for an aside, because I have multiple projects going right now, like one's in beta readership, one just got published. I've got a series that's I'm working on right now to complete. So it's hard for me to like go, how many have actually published and which ones have audio. So I have done 5 full books of audio, all the editing, all the putting it up on ACX for Audible, all the things. Um, but then I have audio edited 2 other books, one of my own and one for a friend, that because I just felt like her book needed to be, it was on marriage and relationships and communication. And I just was like, wives and husbands are busy. They need to listen to this. They don't need to. And she has such a beautiful voice quality that I just wanted her to read it. So I said, I volunteer to do the editing for you. And so that actually got done. Um, so I've done a lot more editing than I have actually recording.
So when you say editing, what does that
Mhm.
mean for the audio
For
world?
the audio portion, it's a technical thing. I'm going to talk about it on Thursday, and I'm going to show you guys samples of recorded audio on a platform and the difference is what it looks like. And so I have like little post-it notes. All y'all can't see that, but I have little post-it notes of like what I have to do in the order I have to do them. Yes, most of it I know now by memory, but if I haven't recorded or edited for a long time, I forget. I forget that these are the standards and the benchmarks that it has to meet in order to be uploaded.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a technical process. It is using software to take a digital recording and edit it. So if you've ever edited a Zoom recording, or if you know how it has the little lines and you kind of squinch it together, and if you've done any kind of podcast and you've edited those podcasts, it's the same kind of thing. It's
Same
just the
process.
voice. It's just the voice. If you've ever done any sound recording, like if you're a musical person and you've done any sound recording, it's very similar to that.
Okay. So that kind of helps you to know like it doesn't have to be perfect on the first try. You don't have to keep starting over. And if you have ums in your speaking voice, that kind of thing, you can cut those out and still get a very polished, finished product, it sounds like.
Yes. If the dogs bark, if the AC turns on, if somebody interrupts you and walks in and says, "Hey mom, I need blah blah blah." Like it's totally editable.
That's exciting. I'm really excited to see a little bit more of the behind the scenes process that you go through. So, um, do you prefer to read in print or listen in audio, and why? Like why do you think that this is such a growing um, preference among
For me,
readers?
I love to be read to. I love to be read to by a voice quality. If I read something that's challenging, I wanted to read The Hobbit to my children, and I realized very quickly that I was not capable of reading The Hobbit. Um, I trust narrators to speak the words and to pronounce them the way they need to be pronounced. Um, that's like just from an educational standpoint, I think that children need to be read to. And if I'm not the one who can read it to them, then we're going to listen to it as a family. Um, I like the continuity of narrators for myself. Like if I kind of get, and I will sometimes just pick a book because I like that narrator
Yeah,
and I like their
that's
voice
fair.
quality. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that they read this. I didn't know that they, narrated this book. And so you kind of get that fan following also. Um, but as far as my passion for it kind of happened. My husband got on this leadership business kick. We didn't know we were going to be starting our own business, but he was just reading all this nonfiction. Nonfiction is one of the most painful genres for me, just to sit and read, because I could think of 100 other things I would rather be doing. There's no adventure. There's no kissing. There's no angsty love. There's no kilts. There's no dragons. There's nothing that would entice me the least bit to read these books. But on audio, I can set it at a pace that I can comprehend it and I can get through that book in about 2/3 of the time than it would take me if they're reading it slowly. Sometimes half the time if I can speed it up that much and read it at a different speed. So he's reading all these books, and I'm like, if you'll get me Audible, I will read all these books with you. Thank you. Now we have an Audible subscription because the library didn't have these on audio. I was looking for free versions. They didn't exist. I wasn't going to go spend $175 every time I needed to get an audiobook. So I was like, get me Audible. I'll read one a month. We'll make it happen. So as that wound down, I was able to get the fiction books in between that I wanted to, as his drive. And so I have, and my kids, and we share the account, so my children have gotten to read books that I wouldn't necessarily pick out for myself. But um, this one got recommended this book. Hey, mom, we've got credits. Can I download this book? Absolutely. So I've read business books. I've read negotiation books. I've read self-help books. I've read some fiction that I wouldn't have read otherwise because it was just really awesome that we had this accessibility.
Yeah, I like that because there are books that are easier and harder for us all to read. I was telling Kelda I had an assignment, a book I had to read, and I kept forgetting to read it. Like at the end of the day, when I normally read, it was just like not on my radar. And so I got the audiobook and I just listened to it, took a few walks, turned it on in the car, and I got through that book so quickly listening to it. It just freed me up. So it was such a great option. And it wasn't a book that would have been like no dragons or kissing in this book at all. A lot of
No
learning,
motivation.
and but it made it easier for me to consume the content. And so do you find that since you listen to so many audiobooks, do you find that you retain as much when you're listening, and if there's ever a challenging time to retain information as you're listening, do you have any tips for how
Yes. If it's
to do that?
challenging, then I would probably start out um, with just little bite-sized pieces. With anything that's challenging, just start out bite-sized. Like if you're not an audiobook person and you're like, oh, I hate the sound of people talking in my head. Okay, then it may not be for you. They didn't make them for you. You're not their audience. I am their audience. I will support the cause. Don't worry about that. But if that's really painful for you, then don't do it. But if you have books that are on your to read list and they've been there forever and you can get them on audio and you can check them out from the library or you can download them from some resource. I have read more classic literature because it was free in the public domain and some nice person sat at their house and recorded it for me, that I would never have done it. Abigail says, wondering how active I am. I do not just sit and listen to a book unless it's right before I go to bed. I don't. I will ride my bike. I will when my kids were little, I would be the mom with the Walkman. Yes, I was that mom with the Walkman with my cassette tape buckled onto my belt, onto my pocket in my jeans, and I'm pushing my kids in the swing for an hour so I can get through a series or get through books or whatever I wanted to listen to. This was way before podcasts. This was way before any of that we have accessibility to now. So for me, I would have not read very much had it not been because my reading time was, because I was a new homeschooler, because I'm a new parent. That's what my nonfiction reading was. So my fiction reading was wonderful that somebody could be reading me a great story in my head and kind of giving me a little bit of a creative, outlet from that.
Yeah.
So,
I
but I
I
walk,
love
I ride my stationary bike. There's I mean, I do not, I'm doing dishes, I'm cooking supper. I'm constantly moving when there's an audiobook. Driving in the car, rarely is there not if especially if I'm by myself, rarely is there not something that I am productively listening to on road trips.
yeah, I love I mean, you're kind of inspiring me to think, start consuming book material,
Mhm.
and in those spare chunks of time when you're doing something else, cleaning, what,
Right.
commuting,
Whatever it
whatever it
is
is.
that you go, okay, I could listen, like just think about your day. I could listen to an audio. And the thing about audio is it stops just like if you put a bookmark in, or if you happen to fall asleep listening to it right before bed, then you can go back to where you thought you started, on chapter 7 or whatever. It'll tell you how long it went. It's very friendly. You can put little bookmarks, sometimes tabs, where you started and stopped and kind of where you are, and your device keeps track of all of it for you. So
Yeah,
for me,
so easy.
I I also, you know, I want to read. I love stories. I love information. I want to gobble it up. But the reality of time for me is just not there. I'm not going to be that kind of consumer of books because I'm not a fast reader. I get tired by the end of the day. I can't focus. Like the words are jumping all around. Like it's just really hard. So why not give yourself like a half a second break and just go, I'm going to listen to this chapter. I'm going to listen to this book. So,
I mean, we all could I mean, we're a friendly audience to words and to books, right? And like we are formed by stories. We need to be hearing stories. And I loved what Kathy said. She's like, I listen to books more than music and radio. And I mean, I think there's a sense in which maybe that's a better use of our time sometimes, right? So
right. Also, with
um
children, I was just going to say this because earlier you said something about, do you remember the stories? I probably remember them better because I hear the voices in my head. I hear how it was spoken and how it was explained. And I remember the narrator's voice and the tone of their voice. The other thing is as a teacher, I know that auditory comprehension is exceedingly higher for students than their actual reading comprehension. So a child who's in third or fourth grade could be reading an eighth, ninth, 10th level book, a much higher book because of it being read to them. And they're going to hear the words and they're going to hear them in context and they're not going to have to struggle with new vocabulary. So they can be exposed to, especially the classics, the classic stories or Bible stories or whatever, way earlier when they're younger through audio. And it does strengthen their reading comprehension later for them to have been read to. Statistically, I mean, there's the Read Aloud Handbook. There's like all these books that talk about Honey for a Child's Heart, like all the statistics about being read to and children being read to. Well, heck, if you don't have time, here's an audiobook, you
yeah,
know?
I love that too because we when my kids were younger, we'd made a pretty regular practice of that. And my voice, I never feel like I have a very strong voice. So having an audio version is like listening to Steinbeck or to The Hobbit or something like that. You can cut through some pretty heady, thick works of literature when somebody else is doing all the talking for you. So
Yeah.
that's a great benefit to families and to children.
We listened to
So
audiobooks every time we traveled with my kids. We always listened to audiobooks. Um, and it was really not just read alouds that we did as a family, at night before we went to bed, we all read stories or whatever, but, or maybe a chapter a night or something like that. But when it came to big literature, I left that to professionals,
that's funny.
really.
So, for those of us who maybe, we have some fiction writers, we have some nonfiction writers, it's obvious how it works for fiction. How would you suggest a nonfiction writer might integrate audio into their work more regularly?
My three nonfictions are all on audio. And the reason being is because I didn't want to limit my audience. Um, I also wanted it to be available to busy moms, busy parents who, because that's kind of the target focus of two of my nonfictions. And that's just been well received in the community. I also think that with nonfiction, especially, I love when it says read to you by the author
Hmm.
because the author's intonation, the stress on their words, the emotion that they feel when they're sharing a story or sharing something that was very meaningful to them, it's really coming from the horse's mouth. Like it is beautiful. And even if you're like, oh, I could never listen to myself read, well, you don't have to. You're not the audience. You're the narrator. You're not the audience. But your audience may need to hear it from your point of view and from your perspective, especially if it is a memoir. I think that you're going to hear the emotion in someone's voice when they're sharing their stories. I love
Yeah, for
that.
sure. That makes sense.
So for me, I think it goes either way. Um, I will talk about this a little bit on Thursday, but I hired out um, my one teen novel to a young man who I used to teach, and because I needed it to hear that voice because it's from that perspective. In two of my other books, they had accents. They had accents that and they're from some male perspectives. That would be ridiculous for me to read those stories. It would be ridiculous for me to share that content with someone. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
that's why you hire it out. That's why you have options. So if you don't feel like you could give your fiction book what it needs, but if it's a nonfiction book, please consider you reading it and learning how to do that for your audience because I think it would just be so much more meaningful than a stranger reading your words and your story. I just think it would have a
Yeah,
different
I think
impact.
that's such a good point, and I think that that helps the reader connect with the author in a unique way to hear their own voice. And if you have issues with your own voice, I said that one time to my sister-in-law. I was like, I don't really like my voice. She's like, just nonsense. Like, just you just can't even go there because you're the only one that really
Hmm.
is paying attention to that. What
Yes.
people really want to hear is the intonation of your voice,
Hmm.
the emphasis you place on different parts
Yes.
of your sentence and that kind of thing. So I think that those kind of limitations and those things that get stuck in our head, that's really just us, right?
It's
It's not
us.
so
It
much
is
the
us.
listeners.
And after having, I'm telling you, hundreds of hours of audio editing my own voice, of not only recording my own voice, but audio editing my own voice, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like it doesn't bother me to hear myself on a voice recording or a memo or anything like that. So just like you, if you were doing a podcast or if you were doing an interview like this, I mean, have you gotten over hearing your own voice interviewing all of us? And me
I
and
don't listen. I'm like I'll be too critical of myself, so I just don't listen.
right,
Maybe that's the
right.
key, right?
That's the key. Okay, you don't have to
Think
listen.
less
Let
of
somebody
yourself
else let
anyway.
somebody else do the editing on your audio, but you do it. So I just listened to it's only my second Brene Brown. I know people have read everything she's ever written, but I just finished Atlas of the Heart on audio with her, and I was so delighted because she would repeat sentences. She's like, "Let me let you hear that again. I know you're walking, you can't, or I know you're doing something else. Let me repeat that to you again." Or there will be a segment where she will say, now, if you want the picture, you can go to this place later. But for right now, let me just describe it to you. So she did a lot of really interactive bits, knowing that the audience was primarily focused on doing other things while they're listening to her, which
Oh,
I thought was
that's smart.
very
I like that.
insightful for a
Yeah.
nonfiction book. I also in at the end of many audiobooks that I have listened to, even if it's narrated by someone else, they'll have an interview, questions back and forth with the author. And if you're a fan of that author, it's a really great geeky moment where you get to get so excited to hear that author's voice and hear it from their perspective and their words and how this all came to be.
That's so fun. So, one of the things Kelda and I were talking about, now I don't have fiction work or even nonfiction work so much as blog posts. And one tool that I know of, and I'm sure there are many others, but one way that if you're blogging and you're regularly posting, you can use a tool called Beyond Words. It's a WordPress plugin. It's free, and it will AI your blog post and read it for people. So that's a cool thing. And then also I recently saw on Substack allows authors to read and offer an MP3 format for their articles as well. So it seems like there's becoming more and more tools available for, beginning, um, I don't know what you call them. It's not podcasters, but readers who are
Right.
creating audible versions of their
Right. And now with
works.
Apple iTunes or Spotify or whatever kind of, platform that you listen to your music on or listen to your podcast on, that's all available for you. It's really kind of neat that we have that technology, and I want to encourage you guys to do it. As far as podcasts or blogs, the blogs that I actually go to and read consecutively are the ones that have an audio version of it, because I don't
Yeah,
have time to
there's
sit and
there's
read
probably a
20
lot of
minutes of
people like that.
something.
Yeah,
So I just think, and I'm not making excuses of why I won't sit down and read someone's blog, but it's like, I really would like to know this content, and they've made it super convenient for me.
yeah,
They just
it's a
made it
good.
too convenient. Either they've made a video version that they've read it, or they've made an audio version that they read it out loud. And it could be verbatim of what the blog says. It doesn't matter. You're reading it. And I just think it gives it, I think you're expanding your audience. I just believe that the more inclusive we can be with our material, the more inclusive, we don't know who our readership is going to touch. Our words are going to touch in that if we have it in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in the business world, they say you're leaving money on the table. So, and
That's a good
probably
point.
in the writing world, you're leaving money on the table. You're leaving
Yeah.
listeners, readers out by not providing content in multiple formats for people. So
I
Kelda,
wanted
tell
to
us.
go back and can I go back and
Sure.
talk about Space's comment? So, her book polishing time lately has involved reading her book out loud, and it's very helpful to see the correlation with tweaking the manuscript. Absolutely. So, I have I have a handful of beta readers that I have relied on for my fiction for quite some time, and they're beautiful humans, but they will not read it. They're like, I can't read it. I don't have time, can't read it. So I make chapter audios on my phone, just reading it out loud to them, or on my computer. I can just email it to them, or I can put it, text it to them, or I can put it in like a Google Drive or something, and they can just, click on it, depending on the length of the audio recording. And so that's been really neat for them to still be able to participate as a beta reader and give me feedback on a particular story, but they haven't had to read it at all. Like they haven't had to manually pick up the manuscript and read it, or read it on a device. And so that's been really, really wonderful that I could participate. So when I go, thank you for being my audio reader, my beta reader, and she's like, oh, you're beta audio reader, your audio listener.
Yeah.
But they want to participate, but they also know their limitations. So they're taking a bath and they're listening to an audio. They're picking their kids up from school. They're listening to an audio. It's just really nice that I can accommodate some of my audience that way, even as beta readers.
Yeah. I mean,
But
if you've got
but
one of these,
as I'm reading it, Space, as I'm reading it out loud, and I'll go, hang on, time out. I have to like do something. So I'll make a quick edit and it's being recorded. And they just laugh at me. They're like, Kelda, you're still editing. I'm like, yeah, because something jumped off the page while I was reading it out loud. I would recommend to each of you to record yourself reading a chapter or reading something and then listening to yourself read it back to yourself as an editing tool, as a polishing tool, not just reading it loud. That has its own place, but to record yourself reading that segment and coming back. And I'll talk about this. I'll probably tell this story again on Thursday, but I will be reading something out loud, recording it. And I'm like, that no human could even say that sentence. Like you run out of breath, or there's too many words, or there's not a comma. Like there's no way to, no human alive could say that word or that sentence in that way. I have to edit the whole paragraph or I have to edit the whole dialogue because that's not a thing someone would really say in real life. So I've been known to change things even in my manuscript that's already been published. I've gone back and edited it so it matched the audio.
That's so good. Such a good tip, because I agree, like reading it out loud, your voice stumbles, you can't take a breath, like you shouldn't be gasping for breath in a sentence, right? Like that's probably just a
Right.
good practice. So, um, tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about. You're going to show us a behind the scenes editing example on Thursday. What else are you going to cover?
I'm going to cover some options for how to get this done if you really have the desire to make an audio of your manuscript or of your whatever it is that you want to share in an audio format. I'm going to give you very specific details about how to make that happen for yourself. And I might give you some warnings and pitfalls of things that I've stumbled into that I was like, oh, I did not need to do that. That was a waste of my time and money. But I hopefully that will help you guys not make those same errors in judgment. But I will tell you the whys, like why we should do audiobooks. And hopefully I haven't covered all of that right now here. And then the hows are definitely, I'm going to tell you how to do it yourself. I'm going to tell you specifically how to do it by hiring it out. And I'm going to tell you very specifically how you can do it economically or, in a range, of investment. And then I will also include, ways to kind of mix and match that, because you can just do a little bit here and there yourself.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear all of that, Kelda. That'll be really, really great. Kind of a new avenue for a lot of us to consider with our writing. So I want to give people a chance. There's been quite a bit of chatter in the chat box. We've addressed some of their comments, but I want to give you all an opportunity to ask Kelda any questions. If you'd like, and if you do, unmute yourself. Let us know your thoughts.
Hi, Kelda.
Hi.
I was wondering about the difference between hiring someone to record, because I've heard a woman speak who that was her business. Like she basically considers herself an actress. And so she does all, particularly I'm talking about fiction now, because I agree with you. Nonfiction should totally be recorded by the author. I think that is huge. But with fiction, what do you feel like? Why did you choose to read your books instead of hiring someone who could do all these voices and kind of dramatize your piece?
Okay, two reasons. One was money. I will tell you the first reason was money. So I did two of my shorter nonfictions because they had already been published. And so I knew that my next book, a novel, was going to be from a woman's perspective. And I felt like I could do her story justice because it's totally I words and, and I could hear her voice and I felt like I could pull it off. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm arrogant. Maybe I'm just totally naive, but I just believed I could. So I did, just like that whole crazy talk in your head, like, oh, I can do that. So from her perspective, yes, I could do it. And again, it was money because it's to hire it all out and have it all done. It can be 350 to $500 a recorded hour. So if you've got a 10-hour book, you're looking at a big chunk of change. So, I couldn't justify that request at that very moment. Does that make sense? Now, you can get real people, and I've actually done some auditions on ACX to record other people's books for money, and that might be $100 a recorded hour. It just depends. There's a range. It might be $50 a recorded hour, like whatever they're willing to pay or whatever the person is, because we're amateurs. You know what I mean? Like we're not all professional people. But the professionals who this is their job and they're taking care of all the technical stuff, and they just give you, here's your audios to download and to upload onto wherever you want them to live and be distributed by, that is painstaking. And that is something that you do have to, there's some technical bits that go along with that if you want it to be that quality. So if it's her business, then she knows what she's doing.
Is
But
that
it's
something
not.
where, is that something
ahead.
where you have creative control? Like if you pay somebody else to record it for you,
I have all the rights. I paid them for a service. I paid you to narrate. So that now there are some deals on ACX or some deals that you can do where you like split the royalties on the audiobook. You know what I mean? Like they won't pay you up front. They don't give you any money up front, but they'll split the royalties. So you might make $5 or you might make $0. You might make $5,000. If you if you did it and they have a big audience, then it might have been worth the split. But I would rather pay somebody the money up front, free and clear, and then take the chance. It was a business investment.
So do you have to edit it when they give it to you?
No, it's all done.
Well done.
It is all done. And that's why it costs money, because it's your time and it's your tech. You do need some technical, skills. But it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities.
So just to clarify, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My internet's been going in and out. To clarify, the $350 to $500 you're talking about is where you have a top-notch professional record it and they do all your editing and all that kind of stuff.
They send me a file and it's like, here, go to this site. Here are your files. They'll live here for 30 days. Download them onto your computer. Then it's your responsibility to upload them. They would have uploaded them for me if I wanted them to be. They would have done that. They also give you a span of time where you can go in and you go, you didn't pronounce that word right, or you didn't do this right. And they go in and make some edits, and they get their character people, their narrators to go in, and then their sound people make those changes.
And for the other person's question, which I'm sorry I didn't see who that was that asked the question, my friend said that she basically auditions for, so she's probably in that realm you're talking about. I've never asked her how much she makes, but yes, where she actually auditions the voices, like here's the gruff miner's voice and here's the, whatever.
Yes.
And then the authors get to choose who they like.
Yes. When I farmed out, I call it farming out. When I took auditions for Sweet Caroline, it was from a dual perspective. And I knew when I heard Hashim's voice, when I heard him give his, because they all have samples, on the websites or wherever you're going to look for, just like if you were going to find an actor for somebody, here's their headshot, here's their repertoire, here's some videos, here's some audios, whatever. So I knew instantly who Hashim needed to be. Caroline, we went through 3 different auditions before. After the second one, my son was just so put out. He was like, Mom, these are not the right people. I'm like, but I like her. And he's like, no, that's not the right voice. And so then we start going screenshots, because he says, you need to find somebody who has the right smile, because Caroline's sweet, 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 sweet. And I was like, okay, so we're going through all these headshots. Find her. He's like, she's the one. She's the one. Look at her smile. And so when she asked me later, she said, why did you pick me? Because they're curious, what made you choose me? And I said, you had the right smile and you carried that smile in your voice. And Caroline has a smile in her voice. And so it just made all the difference in the world in the reading. And she did a phenomenal job with it. And I'm so very thankful I paid her money to do it, because I would have not given her justice. The character, you know what I mean? Even if I had hired Hashim out and I did Caroline's voice, it wouldn't have been the same. I could have. I didn't know I had the option at the time, but I could have.
That's
So it's just
interesting.
neat.
It's like
It's
you're
fun.
creating your own little play too,
You are.
right?
You are. But the
Do you
auditions are
get
very
background
important.
music? Do you get
I did not choose background music. That is an option. And if you want like lead into each chapter or into lead into sections, like a lot of audiobooks do that. I will know forever the Harry Potter series because there's this little do 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 come that starts at the beginning before Jim Dale's voice comes on. All of those kinds of things are just factors that you can put in. I just choose not to. There's not a specific soundtrack or a specific anything like that. For me, that's going to jump in.
I have a question about some apps that are not the whole book, like short form, Headway. There's some other YouTube places that I found that also have apps. What do you think about those, especially when it comes to books that are not fiction, the nonfiction books? Sometimes they have short versions of the books that give you like a summary of them. I kind of like that because I can hear kind of a summary and I don't have to be reading every example, that sometimes.
And we like Cliff Notes. Like we grew up with summaries and is this really the article I want to read? Is this really something I want to dive into? No, somebody already did my work for me and gave me the bullet points. I just think that's good time management, especially with nonfiction. But did they pull out the things that you would necessarily put out if you had read it? It does limit you from really knowing all the information. But I have used those a couple of times doing some research and, it's not the whole thing, but if you really don't need the whole thing, then yeah, it was great, So, I don't know that I would ever use those things because I've never written anything that technical or that, but I think you use whatever resources you need. And I think if it might entice a reader to read your words if you gave them some bullet points and said, hey, we're going to cover these topics.
And Gloria, did you ask about apps?
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying is that there are some apps, some like Headway has an app, like short form, in Blinkist, I think is the other one. There's some apps that advertise that the audio, and also some of them even give you a little written summary too. And so it kind of makes it, for me, I find it helpful. If I'm really curious about a book, then I said, no, I think I'm going to read it myself, and I get it. But it helps to have that summary, I think.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't know if it's cheating, but I do a lot of cheating in that.
I'm gonna say that all of us, we're going to use the resources that we have available to us, and that we do like that shortened form. I'm not familiar with using any of those apps, but when I've done research for topics that were a lot more in depth than I really wanted to go, I appreciated other people giving me those options. And sometimes it does make me want to read that material in long form because it's given me the information that I wanted. Carrie, did I answer your question adequately?
I'm not sure that I actually heard that part. If you did say, what I was asking is like, do you have more than one reader, like a male or a female voice or a young?
I did. Yes, I did. I did for Sweet Caroline because it goes back and forth. The chapters alternate in perspective.
Okay.
I have hired, my former student to read my teen book. It just depends. I rehired the same man that did Hashim to read Dawes because I love the way he read that character's part. But I usually just have one narrator reading and maybe changing the inflection of their voice, or, you know, changing the tone of their voice for different speakers. And I find myself doing it when I'm reading my own books aloud.
Right.
Because you can tell, it's funny because you can tell, like when you're reading aloud, you hear the characters in your mind and you know how they're going to speak or how they're going to do this. Does this person talk fast? Does this person have a very arrogant tone? Does this person, you know, he's warm, or she's really, you know, bossy, or whatever, that you're going to read it with that inflection, even if it's being read by the narrator.
Mm-hmm.
We don't read like robots.
Right. I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you, I just have one 4th grade historical fiction. I'm hoping to expand on that and make it a series of all the California missions. But I have one little girl that just loves this book, and she's read it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. I just thought that might be a fun thing for her to do, because by now she knows the characters.
Right. Hold on 1 second. My AC guy's here. 1 second. Hold on. I'm gonna mute myself. I'm so sorry.
So Carrie, you have somebody in mind to
Yeah. And she's kind of a little bit of a drama queen anyway. So I think that she would be able to, and she would just think it was so fun. And I like the idea of involving some of my former students. Like I have a former student who's doing the artwork for my children's little picture book. And it's giving him an opportunity to stretch his talents and kind of dive in where he wants to really get involved. And I think that would be something that this young lady could do as well. Not draw, but speak, read the parts. So
I mean, this is not a child, is she?
Yes.
A child.
Not the one that's doing the illustrations. The one that's doing the illustrations, he's like 32 or so, but he was one of my 5th grade students. That's for a different book. The one that I'm thinking, just as I'm listening to Kelda, I'm thinking she might think it would be really fun to be able to read this book, and it would be this great kind of learning experience for both of us, but also, give her a little bit of expanding idea of what she could do.
But I'm wondering, I mean, this is a little bit off the subject, but just because I heard something just earlier today about children participating in something that that will bring you money, I don't know how that works with child labor and all that stuff.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
You can pay them. You can pay them money. Right. And if there's any, I don't know about your state, but you can put it in a trust.
Right.
In a sense of like, here's her bank account, and you just put it into a bank account that she can touch when she's old enough to have it as real income. Right. But that it would be, but I think for what we're talking about right now, it's not a huge deal. And we're not talking $100,000. Like we're talking minimal hourly wage. You would probably pay this girl more to babysit than you are, the same rate of babysitting than you would to do this. So it's, it's a, what if she were hired to do a commercial locally? I would investigate that, because I have some students who are very involved in the theater community, and they get hired to do commercials all the time. So I know that they get paid real money to do that.
Right. And most of it does go into like a trust account or something like that. Yeah. So, and of course I'm in California, so everything is complicated.
Right.
But thank you, Gloria. That's a good idea to check that out more thoroughly. Yeah. It was just an idea that came to me as I was listening to Kelda. So
I love those ideas.
It sounds like
I'm sorry, what did you say, Gloria?
No, it sounds like a great idea. And especially when you think about maybe children's books, having children read it, I think that would be wonderful. But yeah, you gotta be cautious with that.
Yep. She might get an agent, Carrie. You might have to deal with her agent.
Yeah, not this particular child, I doubt, but I do know those that do have agents already, and so I could even look that direction. But
yeah, I just think that I've been blown away by people's talents with audiobooks and just their desire to either narrate or to do it themselves. I just have been very motivated by that.
Okay, so you mentioned Jim Dale, who absolutely, I've gone from place to place listening to him. Who else are your favorite? If you could have your dream narrator for your own book, who would
Oh,
it be?
oh
That's
my
a great
goodness.
question.
Okay, Jim Dale, definitely, he is forever and always. He is forever and always. But I don't know if they've taken it off. It's no longer anywhere. I can't find it. And I'm so happy that I actually have legitimate CDs. But he did A Christmas Carol forever ago, and it is my favorite version. And I listen to it almost every year. I just play it out loud. I just play the CDs, and it's just his voice telling me all the wonderful story. I really like, I may not say her name right, Ileana Kadushin. She did the Twilight series. She's really, really good. There's also a lady that does the several books for Amy Harmon. It's her same voice. It's a person that does her, and I love her. And I want to listen to all of Amy Harmon's books read by her. So you do get attached to a voice, but those are voices that I very much just like. I hear them and I'm instantly relaxed. Like it's a very physical response to their voice. But probably because I spent decades with Jim Dale reading to me and all of my children, that I would just go on and on and on for about him. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records for all the voices that he did for the Harry Potter series.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Really.
Yeah, if you
Because
haven't,
he voice acts, like, when someone starts speaking, that character before they even say who it is.
Well, and on that same note, Kelda, I have started listening to books, and the reader's voice got on my nerves so bad that I quit listening to the books. Because and a lot of it is because I feel like they're not really representing the like in a historical fiction, and they make the woman's voice be whiny the whole time, and I just am like, I can't do that.
You're done.
And so I just been like, out with you, and I mean, I might read the book and really enjoy it, but listening to the voices sometimes is really hard.
I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Bronze Horseman. If you're familiar with this series, I didn't know it was a series. My friend loves the book. She talks on and on and on. She's like, Alexander's my book boyfriend. I've known this woman for 20 years, and she just goes on and on and on about Alexander. The book is this freaking thick. It's not on audio. As soon as it gets on audio, I listen to like 27 hours of the Bronze Horseman because I could listen to it. And I'm like, he's in Russia. It's during Leningrad and like all the invasion of World War II and like all this stuff. And I'm like listening and listening. Then I said, is he Scottish? Like I kept saying, is he Scottish? And she's just like, no. And I'm like, are you sure? Because the narrator had a little something Scottish in his voice. And even though he's speaking Russian and saying Russian words, I'm like, so she gets it on audio and she starts listening to it in the pool and she's swimming. Now, this is her favorite book boyfriend of all time. And it was wrong. And she got so mad. And she's like, I thought you were just being silly. I just thought you were being ridiculous. And here it is. It was just the wrong narration. I've also listened to an entire series of books with one narrator. And then the final book, they had to change narrators because the location or the words or the accents or whatever, that narrator couldn't have pulled off. So it's kind of impressive. I just think it's a beautiful talent. I think I'm in awe of people who can really do it very, very well.
I listened to a lot of PG Woodhouse and for a while there because I was doing a lot of driving. And I loved it so much because there was this particular reader, his name was Cyril something or other. So if I went on Audible, I could find him again. But I tried a different reader and it was like a whole nother story. It didn't feel right at all.
Mm-mm.
And then I tried picking up a book myself and it didn't feel right at all. Like I needed PG Woodhouse to be read by Cyril, what's his name? That's the only way it worked. And then it was hilarious.
And that's why they are real, they're using their skills and talents, and they're professionals. And that's what I love about it. Not that you can't do it yourself, not that you can't really make it a meaningful thing, but I think that there's some stories that are best told by, I would not have made it through all of the Lord of the Rings. I wouldn't have made it through, except that it was the same author that had done The Hobbit with me and my children. And when I put his voice in and he just starts reading it to me, and I'm like, okay, I'm home. I'm ready. Tell me all the story. Like I made it through, because they were big books, it's all in the casting. Yes, Kathy, it's all in the casting. It truly is. But I think that's why, if it's your memoir, if it's your story, you're the star. You're the person who needs to tell the story. So I hope my talk on Thursday encourages some of y'all to, to pursue it a little further, to be
Well,
curious about it.
I know this has been really kind of eye-opening in a lot of ways, of all the different ways that we can use and take advantage of this, other medium for reading, writing, and all the things. So we're so excited. Oh, Gloria, do you have a question?
Yeah, also something that I remembered, I was reading some of Kara's devotionals in the app. It was called
The U version.
The U version. There you go. Yes, and I remember one day I tried the reading version, to put on for someone, for it to be read out loud. But it was a virtual thing, one of those, but not a very good one, because you could tell that it wasn't. I use AI for some voices. I do editing all the time, videos and audios all the time for our church. And I use some really good AI that it really sounds real, the person. But in this case, it did sound like it was an artificial something. And I thought about telling you, just now that I thought about it, I'm telling you, wouldn't it be
That's
better?
good to know.
Yeah, because it sounded like, no, I turned it
You're
off.
like,
I said,
that's
no,
not how
never
Kara
mind.
sounds.
No, that doesn't sound right. So, but wouldn't you be able to read your devotionals or someone else? Because I think I did hear someone else in the
Yeah, I think that
YouVersion thing
I
that
do
allows
believe
you
their
to, right?
platform allows you to upload
Right.
your own audio. So that's a good
Yeah.
point, Gloria. I'll do that for my next one, because you don't want some robotic man reading
No,
your words.
no, it didn't sound right.
Good to know. Good to know. Oh my goodness. Crazy world we live in.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Kelda, so much. So you're going to be teaching us on Thursday,
At noon, the same time.
at same time,
Mhm.
same time, same place, everybody. So we look forward to seeing you and hearing more about audiobooks on Thursday.
Yes, I'm excited. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good
All right,
day.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.